ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, friends of the Pan-Jamaica Group. It's an honor to once again welcome you to the Maurice Facey Lecture Series, an annual gathering where we discuss the transformative possibilities of urban development. At the Pan-Jamaica Group, we remain committed to leading efforts to reimagine our urban centers and enhance the quality of life for both our citizens and our visitors. Urban development, when thoughtfully planned and executed, has the power to revitalize our cities and reshape the way we live. Well-designed cities can uplift communities by fostering environments rich with opportunities, promoting inclusivity, facilitating access to services. This in turn stimulates economic growth, attracts investment, and generates jobs. Part of our ongoing mission at Pan-Jamaica is to help drive the restoration and regeneration of Kingston, while supporting the nation's broader long-term objectives. We believe that thriving urban centers can act as engines for national growth, and we envisage Kingston as a vibrant metropolis central to Jamaica's journey towards unity and prosperity. The Maurice Facey Lecture Series plays an important role in fostering the vision set by our founders over 60 years ago. It serves as a tribute to their legacy and continues to be a platform for bold ideas and solutions for our future. My father, the Honorable Maurice Facey, recognized the power of urban development as a tool for transformation. As the founder of the Pan-Jamaican Group, he, along with his brother Lloyd, left a lasting mark on the island through pioneering commercial and residential development projects. Beyond real estate, Maurice's commitment to nation building led him to establish key planning organizations such as the Kingston Restoration Company, Tourism Action Plan Limited, underscoring his dedication to his country's development. My grandfather, Cecil Boswell Facey, a prominent businessman and philanthropist in his day, inspired the creation of the C.B. Facey Foundation. As we celebrate the Foundation's 40th anniversary, this year we acknowledge the ongoing contributions to education, the arts, and the environment. Tonight's lecture is a continuation of this legacy as we focus on a critical element of the urban environment. We will explore the challenge of making a city for people, as our guest speaker helps us to reimagine the possibilities for Jamaica's transportation system. Good mobility is fundamental to a thriving economy. Yet in Jamaica, we have emphasized a system that is overly reliant on the private motor car as the favored mode of transport, despite the fact that only 26% of our citizens own private vehicles. Our road network continues to be designed to give priority to cars, often to the detriment of public safety and equitable access. The investment in and the single-minded focus on the movement of cars in our transportation infrastructure has contributed to the current state of chaos and congestion on our roads, exacerbated by indiscipline and disorder, leading to high rates of accidents and fatalities. While overlooking the needs of many citizens who use other forms of transportation and placing an unsustainable financial burden on Jamaicans, where 20% of our import spending goes towards cars, fuel, and parts, surpassing our expenditure on food. This raises the question, is City of Kingston for cars or a city for people? To address these challenges, we must develop a transportation system that prioritizes inclusivity, equity, and sustainability. We need a fully integrated system that serves all our citizens one that is clean, safe, reliable, and timely. We need an effective school bus system, one that gets our children to school and home again safely and securely. We need effective, dedicated bus lanes to allow for timely, efficient operation of our buses. We need well-located and carefully planned transport centers that are hubs for commerce and interchange. We require bold, coordinated leadership that unites all stakeholders, government, business, and civil society, in a shared vision of a connected and inclusive city. We must look to successful models from other cities and learn from global leaders who have successfully reshaped their urban environments. In that spirit, it is a privilege to introduce this evening's distinguished guest speaker, Enrique Peñalosa, the former mayor of Bogotá, Colombia. Peñalosa is an internationally respected urban visionary who transformed Bogotá's chaotic transport system. His achievements, including the development of the Transmilenio, one of the world's most efficient bus rapid transit systems, have made Bogotá a global model for inclusive, sustainable urban development. During his term as mayor, Peñalosa created an extensive bicycle network, greenways, hundreds of parks, formidable sports and cultural centers, large libraries, 67 schools, and high-quality housing projects for more than 500,000 residents. In his book, Equity in the City, which was recently published by the University of Pennsylvania Press, Peñalosa proposes that a good city constructs social integration and legitimacy. Land and housing, mobility, public space, and waterfronts are some of the themes Peñalosa analyzes from the equity perspective. It is a book about how to achieve a good city where no one feels inferior or excluded. Peñalosa has been included in Planetism's list of the most influential urbanists, past and present. He was also one of the 15 thought leaders in sustainable city development, selected by the Identity Review in July 2023. Peñalosa's work serves as an inspiration for us, demonstrating how cities can be reimagined to prioritize people. He shows us that with the right vision, leadership, and strategies, we can achieve similar transformative results. Please join me in welcoming Enrique Peñalosa to the podium as tonight's guest speaker for the Maurice Facey Lecture Series.
Thank you very much, Steve, Mayor Suevi, Mr. Mark Golding, an award, and to all of you who are here, thank you very much for your generous time and interest to share some ideas on how to make cities that are better for all of us, and better means where we can live happier and where there can be more economic development and better incomes. I was invited to talk about transport, but actually, we cannot talk about transport until we know what kind of city we want. Because it's very different if what we want is a city like Houston than if what we want is a city like Amsterdam. But even before we decide what kind of city model we want, what we really have to think about is how do we want to live? How do we want to live? What kind of life will make us happier? Because a city is only a means to a way of life. So this is a great challenge. And I like to say that here we are going to talk of dreams. I invite you to dream of things that can be. But in the end, you have to do things that are difficult, that are controversial, that require political costs, management, and I think you have one of the best locations in the planet. It's like a dream, this place with these green mountains, the ocean, and all of that. So let's imagine, how do we want our life to be? We need to walk. We need to walk, not just to survive, but to be happy. We could survive inside an apartment all our lives, but the idea is that we need to walk, just as deer need to run or birds need to fly, we need to walk. So a good city, above anything else, is one where it is safe and pleasant for walking, especially for those most vulnerable citizens, for the handicapped, for the elderly, for children. And everybody agrees with this in theory, but in practice, we invest billions in this pavement for cars and the roads for cars, and not so much in the pedestrian infrastructure. A great city is fun for walking. It's pleasant for walking. It's really a pleasure to go out and take a walk. Of course, there are conflicts between a city that is very friendly to people and one that is very friendly to cars. If you have some very wide roads with no traffic lights, it's not very pleasant for a pedestrian, neither to walk next to them, nor to go across them. To go find some kind of pedestrian bridge to go across. Here, for example, this picture in India, you see how they make this overpass, which I would bet is rather useless in terms of mobility, and then they couldn't care less for the pedestrian implications. But also cars are dangerous. They kill people. I could bet that one of the main causes of death in Jamaica, as in most developing cities, is that the people are killed by cars. In 1900, there were no automobile fatalities in the US. There were no cars yet. But in 1920s, motor vehicle accidents in the United States killed more than 200,000 people, only 20 years later. 20 years later. In 1925, in the United States, cars and trucks killed about 7,000 children. Only a few years after the car had been invented. Now, a good cities are more and more important than ever because some things are happening that is changing everything. First of all, households are much smaller. I am sure anybody who is here, my age, not many, happily, many young people, but my parents, their families were 8 or 10 people. I have 4, we were 5. I had 2 children. And my children, despite my great longing to be a grandfather, not children at all. So, the smaller homes, many times, so more and more, before, people used to live all the time in the family, the cousins, the grandparents, they would go on Sundays to the grandparents. More and more, the city is our home. That's where we spend our time. People go for breakfast. You know, I was living in the US, I was like 15 years when McDonald's for the first time made another big open for breakfast. And it was weird, because people say, who will go for breakfast? I mean, you have breakfast at home. But now, of course, people have breakfast, lunch, and dinner outside. I bet that of all of us here, for every time we meet with our friends at home for a dinner, we go out to a restaurant or a cafe 50 times. So the city is our home. We spend more time awake out of our homes than inside our homes. So the city is crucial for our happiness. We are very worried about how our apartment is, what color it is, how big it is, what kind of sofa should we have. but we don't care so much about having a city with not a good enough sidewalk or park or anything. And perhaps it's more important for our happiness, the quality of our city than the quality of our apartment. But there is something else. Now we are in a different world. That is amazing. More and more people can work from anywhere. People can work from anywhere. And then how are we going to compete? How are we going to attract those people who can choose where to live? But the most crucial thing is, for economic development, in the past, we are competing for people at this time. One of the big problems for Jamaica and for Colombia is that many young people are leaving to go elsewhere. How can we attract great people from abroad and retain our best people with great cities, with great quality? So this is crucial for our survival. I would say that a good city is more important for economic development than tax rates or than electricity rates or than things, but normally we don't give much attention to this. The Minister of Finance could not care less about sidewalks. But this may be more important for economic development than many of the variables it deals with. A good city like this makes us happier and it retains people, attracts people. We are running out of people. It's something that is very weird, but we are. A good city also constructs equality. In a good city, nobody should feel inferior or excluded. In a good city, you have many great public spaces, such as a Central Park in New York or something like this, where billionaires and low-income people meet. Rich people and poor people always meet because they may work as at somebody's home, or they can be the doorman at the building, or so, but they meet separated by hierarchies. If they meet in public space, this is a completely different relationship. They meet as equals. And this is a completely different way. And this is what makes a great city. In Central Park, I can assure you every day there are many people who have billions of dollars walking next to others who have nowhere to sleep that night. Now, the equality of public space is one of the qualities a city can construct. But a good city constructs other kinds of equality. For example, equality of life, that people should have, regardless of their income, without being members of a country club, access to all kinds of sports facilities. Sports facilities, gyms, music lessons. Beyond the obvious health and education and things like this. And I would call other equality, which is what I call democratic equality. I don't know the Jamaican Constitution, but I am sorry. But I would bet, thank you, Steve. I would bet that as all democratic constitutions, it says, or is implicit somewhere, that the principle for any democratic constitution is that all citizens are equal before the law. That's the principle. But it's not just theory. If all citizens are equal, then there is another consequence, which is extremely powerful. Public good prevails over private interest. This goes to the extreme that it allows you to even forcefully buy private property, use eminent domain. And this is not communism. They do it in the United States all the time. It's but also, if all citizens are equal, a pedestrian, has a right to the same amount of road space as somebody in a Porsche or a Lamborghini. If all citizens are equal, somebody in a bicycle has a right to the same amount of road space as somebody in a luxury car. If all people are equal, a bus with 100 passengers has a right to 100 times more road space than a car with one. This is not theory. This is democracy. Is not just that people vote. That's just one ingredient. Democracy is that constitutions are obeyed. And I must make clear that I believe that the market and private economy is the best way to manage society's resources. I'm not promoting communism. It's just basic democracy. Now, mobility is very peculiar. Because all problems we have in society tend to be solved as we become richer. If we are richer, we'll have better health, better nutrition, better recreation, better housing. I mean, but in terms of mobility, it can get worse. We can get richer and get the mobility, more traffic jams, worse problems. So, and depending on the kind of development that the city had, the city model, you know. And this is a picture here. But I will tell you some things. Traffic is getting bad everywhere, but this is, don't think. Many people think, oh, if we make some bigger roads, we will not have traffic jams. This is in Shanghai, you know. They have the same problem. It is also counterintuitive that bigger roads do not solve traffic jams. On the contrary, at some point it can make them better, because make them worse. Because what creates traffic is not just the number of cars. It's, for example, the number of trips that a car takes. For example, 10 cars that go for 1 kilometer create the same amount of traffic that one car that goes for 10 kilometers. I mean, one car that goes for 10 kilometers creates the same traffic as 10 cars that go for 1 kilometer. So if somebody moves, if somebody who used to drive to work for 2 kilometers and moves to a place where he has to drive 20 kilometers, it's like if there were 10 more cars in the city. So if bigger roads make it easier for people to go farther, then, but then, well, we'll go later about the importance of density. I hope I don't forget to talk about this. Look at these highways in Houston. Completely jammed. They don't move. Or this in Puerto Rico, I mean, this is Houston highways, you know. I don't know how many lanes there are there, but anyway. But there is something even more painful. Bigger roads don't solve traffic, and mass transit does not solve traffic either. Mass transit, such as subways, buses, trams, whatever, they solve mobility, but they do not solve traffic jams. Some of the cities with the worst traffic jams have metros, extensive metro networks, such as Delhi or Bangkok or Mexico City or Sao Paulo, and even New York was ranked first in traffic like a couple of months ago by some study. Now, so how do we solve traffic jams? How do we solve traffic? The only way to solve traffic is by restricting car use. How do you restrict car use? There are many ways. The most obvious way to restrict car use is to restrict parking. It's very important. If we are going to get rid of parking, such as a lot of very useless parking along King's Road here, then the people who park there will make such a racket. And so they will come to the mayor, say, now where will I park? And so the mayor can tell them, you can park wherever you want. This is not my problem. The fact, the parking is not there are many constitutional rights. I'm sure in the Jamaican constitution there are many rights, you know, many rights. But I'm sure one of them is not the right to park, you know. The fact that somebody buys a car does not give the government the obligation to find him parking, in the same way that if they buy a refrigerator, it does not give government the obligation to give them an apartment, you know? So, these are political discussions. Now, here, for example, we have in Bangkok, the traffic jam right under the subway, to make it very clear. You know, for those who may think that the subway will solve traffic. Now, mass transport, let me tell you about restricting traffic in parking. London, central London, offices in central London have not been allowed to have parking for the last 60 years. For example, the biggest tower in Europe, which is called the Shard, designed by the famous architect Renzo Piano, has about 10,000 people work there, and it has 45 parking spaces, only for the handicapped. So why do people use public transport, by the way? Why do use people in New York public transport or in London use public transport and not cars? Because they have to. They would love not to use it. There are a few eccentrics in the planet, such as the Swedes or something, that they do use public transport because it's a philosophy, a different kind of. But most societies, they don't use public transport and they really have to. And so they have to when it's too slow to go by car and it's much faster to go you by public transport or it's no parking or whatever, but not because they love it. Now, sidewalks. In terms, I would propose to you that the main difference between an advanced and a backward city in terms of infrastructure is quality sidewalks. It's not subways or highways. Of course, upper income people really want just to make roads for cars. They couldn't care much for sidewalks. Usually it's changing, and this is what I hope many upper income people in this lecture will become radical revolutionaries. But sidewalks, look, this is, I mean, the worst obstacle to achieving quality development of a city is cars parking, a quality developing city. This is all over the place, you know. There should never be parking bays. I mean, where there should be a sidewalk. Again, this is not a right. This is, besides it loses value, destroys the value when you begin to park like that. But sometimes, many times, when I had this war, let me tell you, I used to have, even if you don't believe it, I used to have black hair before these battles to get cars off where there should be sidewalks. And many times people used to tell me, man, don't be a nuisance. There is enough space for cars to park as well as for people to walk by. Like here, for example, people will say, there is enough space for cars to park as well as for people to walk by. So we had a campaign on TV which said, you know, we tend to think that sidewalks are relatives of streets because they live next to each other, you know. But actually, sidewalks are not relatives of streets. Sidewalks are much closer relatives of parks and plazas. And it is just as absurd to say that in a sidewalk, there is enough space to park cars as well as for people to walk by, as it would be to say that we can turn the main park or the main plaza of the city into a parking lot so long as we leave enough space between cars for people to walk by. It's clearly not very... Now, so it can be remembered that a pedestrian, again, I mentioned, has the right to the same amount of road space and the one person in the car, you know? Here, you know, Colombia, so that you don't say I'm showing Jamaica, this is a big problem in Colombia. But again, here too, you know. Tasty, the people in Tasty, they think they have a right to make a parking there on top of where there should be a sidewalk, you know? They really believe it, you know? Now, when I became mayor the first time, there was not a single decent sidewalk in Colombia. It was a war. It was so difficult. I mean, you think, again, it's so difficult because the people who are going to benefit from nice sidewalks, they never say thank you, you know, for you people. But those who loses their parking, they make a revolution like, I mean, it was the biggest, so on, they get you into trouble. You know, this is what we found in Bogotá, and let me show you one place where we had a war in this street in Bogotá. We had things like this, and then we took the cars out and made the sidewalks like this, and it was a war. They were only 10% of the people who had cars, but they were the most powerful people in society at that time in '98, you know? And so we made this, and then we made this. And now, of course, there are many good sidewalks in Bogotá, but still, most streets in Colombia and in Bogotá, somebody on a wheelchair cannot go from one corner to the other. That's a fact. It's not, we are not, I mean, we have advanced a little, but we are far from where we should be. Anyway, ideally, sidewalks, how wide should sidewalks be? There is not a rule for this. This is not some engineering formula, you know. It's something that the bigger, the wider, the better they are, you know. Anyway, one thing that there is a lot of discussion usually when government makes housing or whatever about how high the building should be. Many neighbors protest when buildings are high, or in other cases, people decide the homes, the apartments are too small, and they are valid arguments, discussions. But much more important than the height of the building or the size of the apartment is the amount and quality of public pedestrian space around it. That's what we should discuss when there is an apartment, you know. There was this marvelous British architect, Richard Rogers, who used to say that the most important part of the building is what happens when it reaches the ground. Whenever an architect makes a building, the way to judge where is a good building before anything, I mean, not that they get prizes or something, is whether in front of this building it becomes more pleasant to walk, to play, to talk, to do business, to kiss, whatever, you know? That's, or the opposite. But I would almost say this for any other infrastructure we make in the city. For any road that we make, any road, we have to judge whether a road is good or bad according how good is the road for pedestrians, you know? And not just this road that you make towards the outskirts of the city, still you need big sidewalks because very soon that will be urbanized anyway. This is a good sidewalk. There is another issue. Not only sidewalks have to be big, they should not have, for example, there is some horrible buildings that have parking in the first floor and sometimes in the second and in the third. So you walk next to a blind wall. If somebody kills you there, nobody sees, you know. But even if they don't kill you, it's very boring, you know. So what you need is in the first floor, windows. Of course, there are thieves in Bogotá and in Paris and in New York, but they have security windows or bars or whatever. You know, everywhere there are thieves. In China, there must be amazingly agile thieves because they have bars even in the 20th story floor. But anyway, but so this is a good sidewalk like the one we see in New York. Kingston, I mean, I just don't have good pictures because I was coming last night from the university and I saw this, has beautiful architecture downtown, amazing, all kinds of beautiful buildings. What I was going to say is that this road in Kingston, in the center where this thing is, Kings Road and all this, if you just make, I mean, let me tell you how, there are many ways to revitalize a deteriorated area. But one is if you would just make big sidewalks, beautiful sidewalks, underground cables, and put some beautiful lighting, good lighting, I can bet you that this area would revitalize by itself. Just those three ingredients. But of course, government has to help. You know, you have to put much bigger sidewalks, you know. Ideally, you would do some other things, but bigger sidewalks, quality sidewalks, maybe trees, ideally trees, lights, and I can assure you the private sector will do the rest. Now, we must be careful because car infrastructure very often destroys a city. Look like this, you know. Reason, as has happened in many developing cities, Kingston has not been invaded by motorcycles, like Sao Paulo and Bogotá and Barranquilla, completely millions of motorcycles, and they violate all the traffic regulations, and it's a complete mess. But the weather here is perfect for motorcycles, so you have to be very careful. And if you allow motorcycles, you have to be very strict from the start, not to allow them to ride on sidewalks or to violate all the traffic regulations, because otherwise they take over the city, you know? Now, urban highways. Urban highways are like poisonous rivers. People cannot walk next to them. They cannot walk across them. They don't even have public transport in them. They are completely mad. And they lower the values of all property around them. They lower the values. They are the worst thing that can happen. So much better than highways. I do believe that you need big roads. I'm not saying you don't need big roads, but much better than highways is boulevards or avenues, whatever you want to call them. What is the difference? First, you have traffic lights where people can go across. Second, you have big sidewalks, trees, public transport. For example, this is the Champs-Élysées. It is the most famous boulevard or avenue in the world. But what is interesting, this is not a pedestrian street. It has 10 car lanes. And yet, it is an area that increases the value of everything around it. All tourists want to go there to this 10 car lane road. You know, you would say it's a little crazy. You know, tourists want to go to this 10 car lane area. They say they are going to reduce the number of car lanes now, but for now it is like this. And it has a lot of shops, but it has these kind of sidewalks. Big sidewalks and trees, and then you have shops and all kinds of things. No parking lots in the first floor, no parking, but windows, and so this is the kind of thing that we can do. And the capacity of a big avenue or boulevard is not much lower of that of a highway, among other things because of the following. All urban highways get jammed, completely jammed. So the difference between the amount of cars that they move and the cars that an avenue moves is not that much different. But even when there is no traffic, they move about 30–40% more. But the city benefits anyway. Why not imagine even crazier things? Roads where half the space is given, half the space for cars, half the space for pedestrians. Or even with buses, BRT, and half the space of the road. This is, parks. Now, I would propose to you that inequality is mostly felt during leisure time. It's not felt when we are sleeping, because you can be a billionaire or a very poor person and you are sleeping. Maybe the low-income person sleeps better. And it's not at work, because the lowest employee in a company, they go to work, they meet their friends, they have problems, they have fun. So they are more or less equal. But the difference is felt when they go into their leisure time. When the upper income person goes to a nice apartment or house, garden, country clubs, theater, restaurants, vacations, country houses, all kinds of things. And the low income person goes to a very small house, very small home, and he or she and their children, the only recreation alternative they have maybe is the telephone or the TV or something. So it's crucial, the very least that a democracy should provide people, low-income people, is high-quality pedestrian space. High quality. This is very important for equality, for democracy. This is not just some kind of luxury that we do if we have money left over. You know? Let's go quickly. This is the kind of thing that you do in a good city. Walk, even low, handicapped people, you know. Parks. Parks are not a luxury. They are as necessary as hospitals or schools. And, in my opinion, they should have what will make them full of people. It's not that a park should be only contemplative, just with trees and paths. No, maybe it should have synthetic turf soccer fields, gyms, children's playground. Who decides? Architects? No. Mayors? No. Those who is what will make the parks more full of people. Whatever. What is it that will make it the more full of people? Maybe now we need to have soccer fields in the parks, illuminated with synthetic turf. Maybe in 50 years, we have to take out the synthetic turf soccer fields and just put trees and paths, whatever. But what is the quality of a park is measured by how much it is used, not whether it wins architectural prizes. This is very interesting because New York made this huge park when they were only 1 million inhabitants and their income per capita was like Jamaica's is today. And they had the vision to create this. But I have seen many parks here, so I should not even, I put this before coming, but parks are crucial. We made like more than 1,500 parks when I was mayor, but like this is the thing we need. Maybe in 100 years, they will need a conservative parks with no sports facilities. But at this time, we need people to go there and have fun. This is the things that we did all over Bogotá. We need to save land for parks. This is a very peculiar case because this is in the center of Colombia, we demolished there more than 32 hectares, more than 1,200 buildings in my 2 administrations, and we made parks, housing, cultural centers, universities, and this park. If we believe in democracy, sometimes you have more parks than us, but if you don't, sometimes you have to use eminent domain. For example, this was the polo fields and the horse riding facilities of the most exclusive club in Colombia. All the biggest billionaires were there, the former presidents, everybody, and we use eminent domain to take over this park, to make it into a public park. This is not communist again, this is democracy. By the way, I have nothing against the members of this club. I love them, many of them are good friends. They even have given me money for my campaigns and all this, nothing against them. It's just, this is my job to do as a mayor, things like this. This was a big battle because we had, for example, a very low income informal settlement, former informal, and then a high income on the left. And then they made a huge fuss because they had taken over a piece of the park and to make a tennis court. And they make a huge fuss for us because we made this park. A huge opposition from the upper income people. And now the children of the low income people and the upper income people play together very happily. No problems, and both are very happy with the park. Now, we made, for example, happiness centers. This is some cultural and sports facilities with Olympic swimming pools and gyms and theaters and dance rooms and, bicycles. In Bogotá now we have more than 1 million daily trips by bicycle today. We began to do protected bikeways in 1998, many years before Paris or New York or London. Of course, after Netherlands or Denmark or things like this. But again, this is creating equality. We have now 800 kilometers of protected bikeways. A protected bikeway is a symbol that reminds us that a citizen on a $30 bicycle is equally important to one on a $50,000 car. Like, he feels very important in his bicycle, for example. We have the BRT next to it, but more than 10% of trips in our city are made by bicycle today, more than any other city in America. What is this? With bicycles, it's no chicken and egg dilemma. First comes the infrastructure, and then the bicyclist. It's not like there is no bikeways because people don't use bicycles, and then there is no bicycles because there are no bikeways. No, in this case, first is the infrastructure. When we began to make bikeways, there was nobody using bicycles for work. They use them for sports, but never for transport. And in the Netherlands was also like this. And the protected bikeway, again, has 2 symbols. One, it protects the cyclist, but the other one, it is a symbol that shows that the cyclist is important, that is an important citizen. It constructs equality. But I want to show you this, which is one of my biggest pride in life, next to this. Because why do I show you? One, because I want to show off, but yes, it's true. But then because I think it can be relevant for you to do something similar. Minister, thank you. This is something we did to the southwest of the city, when the city was growing like crazy, and there were only some informal settlements, and the rest was nothing. And so we did this bicycle and pedestrian boulevard, or bicycle highway, or whatever you want to call it, before there was anything, because I knew the city was going to grow beyond that later. you know? And this one is 24 kilometers long through, I will show you later. Through these low-income neighborhoods, look, this is a wonderful picture. You know why? Because first, look at the luxury. Fantastic pedestrian infrastructure, even underground cables, you know, bicycle infrastructure, and the car in the mud. So, this is constructing equality, democracy. Again, this is not communism. And I don't do any of this with hate. Just on the contrary, to construct harmony. So, and here you see it going. We build also beautiful schools, even a swimming pool, parks, all kinds of things, and this is going next to this. In this, which formerly informal neighborhoods, we legalize them, we give them water, sewage. Oh, I mean, this is a long story. I don't have time for that now. But this is what you can do. After the city grows around it, this is what you have. See? Today, we have more than 120 kilometers. Bogotá is very dense, one of the most dense cities in the planet. So it's difficult to find a space to put this thing through. And we have more than 120 kilometers of greenways, and like this, that link some very poor neighborhoods to some very wealthy neighborhoods. Kingston, for example, 100-kilometer pedestrian and bicycle three-line promenade, for example, along the waterfront, it will be revolutionary. And then it could leave the waterfront and go around the urbanized area of the city. And in the first time, you don't have to do it the whole thing. You just have to reserve the area and plant the trees. You don't have to do the whole finished thing or the 100 kilometers. Just, you know. Why not in a city? I mean, if that, of course, for us it's too late, Kingston and Bogotá. But for example, New York, if they were to demolish New York, I'm sure they would make something like this. Instead of just Central Park, parks going all across of Manhattan. Or for example, one park, greenways going without cars next to them. Let's imagine something like this, you know, greenways for hundreds of kilometers without cars there. The road for cars also, of course, on the right. We have an interesting democratic exercise every Sunday. We close 120 kilometers of main streets, arterial streets, and we get like 1.5 million people riding bicycles and jogging every Sunday. Rich, poor, all kinds of people, old, young. It's very beautiful. And we even we proposed to the people to vote to have one car-free day a year, the first Thursday of every February, in 8 million inhabitant city. And people approved it. So not even the president can change it. Not Congress, not the mayor. The only way to change this is if there was another popular vote, and they would remove the car-free day. And so this is a very interesting exercises. Waterfronts. I come from a city in the mountains, and we don't have water. And I mean, even we have just some little pond, and we just go crazy. And you have this amazing waterfront. Not only, I mean, you really are privileged by God, you know. I don't think it's fair, because you could have waterfront or mountains, but not both, you know, and not so green, you know. Anyway, it's amazing this is so beautiful. And I'm serious. This is one of the most beautiful places in the planet. Not exaggerating, really. And then you are not using well your waterfronts. You really are not. You could have something amazing. And for example, for waterfronts to construct social integration and improve cities' quality of life, you need to be free of public access, have pedestrian infrastructure, ideally with no motor vehicles next to them, and have easy access. Like these waterfronts, New York or, you know, Sydney, or this is London. London has some of the best parks in the planet. So you'd think people don't care about going to this little river, you know, it's nothing, you know, it's a little river. And this is because the tide is high, because when it's low, you know, and still look, they go crazy over this little pond, you know. Imagine if they had something like what you have, you know. I mean, this is so This is New York, crazy, beautiful infrastructure. This is Moscow. Zurich. Now, Kingston has misused waterfronts. I don't know enough Kingston, but you have these roads, engineers. Well, let me tell you, waterfronts now are the thing in the world. Here are many architects, and I thank them. I am honored. I love to work with architects because I'm not one, so I don't have to discuss anything. I just believe them everything. So, but this thing that now the most attractive part of cities is waterfronts is very recent. It's only something of the last 50 years, 60, Why? For thousands of years, the waterfront was the worst part of the city, because sewage would drain on open sewers, and so it smelled horrible. It's where the squatters were, the crime, the prostitution, everything. It was the worst part of all cities. And then finally, very recently again, only in the late 19th century, and mostly 20th century, the sewage pipes and all this to clean the rivers were built in cities in the world. But then what happened? Engineers came. And engineers, okay, fine, thank you. I'm being threatened with time cut. I think I will be finished. Anyway, engineers love waterfronts to put railroads and roads next to them. Why? Because there are no intersections. So it's perfect. It's the perfect place to put roads. They don't care that they destroy this for human enjoyment. They just want the roads and the trucks and the cars to go by. And so they destroy the waterfronts all over in cities all over the world. Even in 1963 or 1964, President Pompidou in Paris, nonetheless, Paris, put a horrible highway next to the river. In 1960 something. This is so recent that we are conscious that water is important. And only about 4 years ago, Mayor Hidalgo in Paris turned this highway into a pedestrian space. But this is so recent. So now, it was Paris' turn, now it's Kingston's turn. Now, you could turn, why not, for example, I will say something crazy. You will excuse me if I say some sacrilegious things, For example, if you have this road and you demolish a bunch of houses here and put the highway here, the highway here, put the houses, the buildings behind, some big buildings, and between the buildings and the water, only pedestrian, only a fantastic park, only pedestrian. And then you put 15-story high buildings. For the people who live there, they are going to make the business of their lives. They're going to make a lot of money. Because now they have one house, they will have 2 apartments that will cost 3 times what they have now. But then again, it's democracy. We have to work. Public good prevails over private interest. It's democracy. But anyway, I'm just saying, here architects, why don't we make some beautiful renders about what it would be like, I know at first it's shocking. And you will say, how can you do such horrible thing? And blah, blah, it's not politically correct, and blah, 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 blah. But let's think in terms of the next 500 years. One of the advantages that you have is that the waterfront doesn't have things that are very valuable. And so you could do these things relatively easy. You don't have to demolish 20-story high buildings or things like this. But, but you have other things. I saw just very short drives, and I saw you have parking lots next to the water. You have a jail next to the water. You have a bus terminal, abandoned and non-used bus terminal station next to the water. So, and you have these, I say, my God, if I were Kingston, if you were in Bogotá, you would understand why I say, you are sitting on an amazing treasure. And you could have giant trees for shade, and a beauty, anyway, something world-class because no waterfronts, I don't know very few quality waterfronts in tropical areas. For example, Guayaquil in Ecuador You know, they completely turned the city around because they made a fantastic, I mean, you can discuss the architectural merits or not of the Guayaquil Malecón, the walkway or whatever, and on the Guayas River promenade, and it transformed Guayaquil. You know, Guayaquil was really a very bad quality city, and now Guayaquil is an amazing city. And the heart of the improvement was the waterfront promenade. It's interesting to go look at what they did. But you could do something even much better than Guayaquil. But anyway, let's go quickly to something else. Now, mobility. Montego Bay and Kingston, even though it's very small, you need some public transport to work because you are suffering by traffic jams and all this. I put this picture in the wrong place because I got them, but anyways, about what you have in water. This is like the best thing you have in Waterfront so far, but it's, you know, you can do better. You can do better because you have this amazing thing. I would love to come here, ride bicycle under trees. Now, buses. What is good public transport? Good public transport is low cost and high frequency. So you go to take the bus or the train, and you don't have to wait 1 hour for this to come by, or half an hour or 15 minutes. But for this to be low cost, you need density, a compact city. I should tell you, Kingston has very low density, and I don't even know the numbers. It's very obvious because you have so much surface parking. If you have surface parking, it's because land is very cheap. So you don't have enough density. You know, in any density, you'll never find surface parking. You'll never find surface parking in New York or in London or not even in Bogotá. You know, this doesn't exist. But here it's all over the place. Here in this hotel, you know. But you need density. If you have density, all sustainable mobility works well. Bicycles work well because distances are short. Buses work well, trams work well, metros work well, whatever. But so it is important to make an effort to make the city more dense. And I would make the city more dense. I think you need to make a plan. I myself, if I were to dream, you have to dream and do it. I mean, you have a magic wand, it's time. For us, for me, 50 years is a long time, too long. But for the city of Kingston, is nothing. You know, to have a project to be done in 20 years is nothing. You don't have to do it in 2 years or 3 years. But anyway. So, more important than choosing between metros or buses is to have density. All sustainable transport works with density. And with low density, nothing works again. Now, even if you have 1 or 2 or 3 subway lines, you will need a lot of buses. You know London. London has one of the most extensive subway networks in the planet. It was the first metro in the world, of course. And London moves 50% more people by bus than by subway, by the tube. So, buses are, but now, let me tell you, buses are not cool. They are not sexy, you know. In 1940, every city in the planet with more than 100,000 inhabitants had trams. Every city. But then, it was considered that trams were inferior, for the poor, bad quality, backward. The same that we think of buses today. But the fact is that when buses appear, and they appear much later than cars, for a long story I will tell you another time, they took out all the trams in all cities in the world and replaced them with buses. Now, rail costs much more to build and to operate than buses, much more. By the way, the more and more, I can bet you in 10 years, buses will be electric, all electric, and driverless. So what's the big difference between buses and trams or whatever? You know, what makes mass transit is the exclusive right of way, not whether the wheels are metal or I mean, there are some subways that have rubber wheels. This is a very famous writer that you may, all of those of you who like And he talks a lot about density. It's very interesting because he says that more dense cities are more productive, more creative, and are wealthier. And this is a Harvard professor, but anyway, he says, for decades, economists like me have argued that buses are vastly more cost-effective than trains. Yet, trains cause heart to flutter, while buses elicit groans. So, or another, in the Financial Times, this very famous British newspaper says, trams were phased out because they were inferior to buses as a means of public transport. They still are. But no, now we think trams are super sexy, you know? And so, I know I will offend many of you who think trams are the best. I was sent, before I came here, many articles, and all solutions that were proposed in the articles about trams were that we should have put some rail. All I would ask is that is evaluated in terms of cost, of investment cost, operational cost, capacity, flexibility, urban impact, everything, and then you decide. But the advantage of buses is that you can do it, it costs much less and you can do it much quicker. This is what we had in Bogotá. A mess the same as you, the same. Individual buses competing like crazy, but much worse because we are bigger. And then people said the same when I have said here we could do the change that I would propose. It's impossible. It's impossible. The same that have been told here, impossible. But it was a war against powerful car owners and against the informal bus operators. And this is what we created, and we put it a name, the Transmilenio bus. It's the best bus system in the world, by far, today. It moves 2.4 million passengers daily with only 114 kilometers of trunkways. It moves up to 72,000 passengers per direction. For those of you who are not into transport, this is more than all of the world's subways, except for 2 or 3. And the cost, of course, is a fraction. But also it's a democratic symbol. I love it, you know, when a $200,000 car is stuck in the traffic jam and doesn't move, and the bus goes by next to it, and a child goes like this, you know. That is democracy at work. Now, many studies have proved that Transmilenio increases land values all around where it goes. Even there is a Berkeley professor, researcher Nick Tsivanidis, that found that Transmilenio had increased the city productivity and income. He said that Transmilenio increased Bogotá GDP per capita by 2.9%. And Transmilenio explained 2.8% and between 2.8 and 12% of the GDP growth between 2000 and 2016. So this is interesting for something that is much less. Another thing, cities change. And if you are stuck with a subway, you cannot move it, but the bus, you know, is easy too. So this is our bus system in another place. The cars stuck in traffic. And so they will think about it later on. A lot of bicycle parking at many bus stations and bus terminals. This is being expanded at this time. We have 114 kilometers, but every single mayor that came after me expanded the system. Even mayors who were my political enemies, regardless of different parties. So why did they do it? Because it works and it's low cost, relatively. It's nothing, it's just, you know. So this is what is being expanded by about 60% at this moment in many new trunkways, such as this. Here is in Jamaica, in Kingston, just to show a road where you could put the BRT. And also, there should not be such parking bays here either. You know, maybe a better, bigger sidewalk, with all due respect. But anyway, last time I came many years ago, this was the train. I mean, I'm not making fun. I'm just saying why not? I mean, you see there is no train in any dense city in the world. You don't find surface trains in Paris or in London or in Madrid. You have elevated trains or underground, but not on surface. Why? Because you have to put fences next to them if you are operating a fast train, a high capacity. And so with buses, no. I think you could study the possibility of putting a train, a BRT, a bus-based system on the rail corridor. And of course, you will have to buy out the squatters and all of these things. It's normal. Everywhere in the world, rail rights of way have been squatted, bought. I mean, this is normal. But not to have the BRT all the way in the rail. But I mean, I don't know because I don't know enough. The BRT has to be put where there is the most demand. But of course, a little consideration can be given to do it in a place that is easier. Now you say, oh, we want to put rail or a metro later. Fine. If you want to put it later, fine. You get the buses out and you put the metro or whatever you want to put. Now, high quality public pedestrian space, I mean, for example, about 30% of the cost of our investment in BRT has been on public pedestrian space. 30%. 40% improving the car lanes and only 30% for the BRT proper. Here, for example, we are making demolitions to make bigger sidewalks. Not this is now, quickly. Let's go quickly because I don't want to slow you with this. But this is, for example, in Istanbul. There are more than 300 cities in the world that now have BRT systems. This is in Istanbul. There are in Sao Paulo, in Rio de Janeiro, in Mexico City, in Guatemala City, in several Pakistani cities. I mean, this is nothing to be ashamed of to put BRT systems. This is, again, the Transmilenio system next to some drainage canal. It's important. You don't need this. You don't need this. But here you should see how there is some stop. There is at the station, there are 2 lanes so that you can have some express buses that don't stop at the station. And so this increases the speed and the capacity of the system. But in a small city like this, I don't think you will need that. But you will have to have the experts evaluating this. Now, if there was fuel, let's assume there is a crisis. And there is fuel only for 5% of the vehicles in Kingston. To whom would you allot it? To whom? Clearly, you have to allot it to trucks that distribute food and all this, and to public transport. It would be suicidal to give it to private cars. You know, you would die. So now, if what is scarce is not fuel, but space, what do? In some places, in many cities, they have put BRT and taken out cars. Here in Bogotá, in the center of the city, we took out, this was an avenue with 4 lanes for cars, and we put only BRT and pedestrian space. Or this is in Melbourne, for example. Anyway, quickly, I'm going to finish quick. What is important is not, you will ask, how fast is the bus or the train? I mean, without traffic lights, you know, if you have a train that goes from here to Montego Bay, the train is much faster than a bus. You can have high-speed trains that go 300 kilometers per hour or something. But when you have an urban metro or something that has to stop every 500 meters or 1 kilometer, the difference with the bus is not that big, no? But more important than the speed is the travel time. For example, if this is, for example, if we had spent all the money we have spent on BRT on a subway, we would only have the red line because it costs like 10 times more. So the important thing is that if you have BRT, you can have this thing going much more places in the city, and then the system can be much closer to the origin and destination of all trips. So this is now. I'm just saying, I'm not going to go into this detail. I'm just have taken a look at the cost of the fare that people are paying in the unlicensed taxis and all this. And I think it's a fare that is very close to covering cost. And even it's easy to cover costs in the exclusive right of way. In Bogotá, by the way, first we made 1 trunkway, 2 trunkways. Then more and more and more, and they continue to make more trunkways. But now the whole system in Bogotá is fully integrated. So you can take a bus and you can change with the same card, you can change 5 times from one bus to another, and even to the cable car. And we have a metro under construction, and you will be able to change from the metro to the bus, to the BRT, to the regular neighborhood bus with the same ticket. Now, let's go quickly because I don't want to, it's too much already. But now, BRT is very difficult to do well. Very difficult. It doesn't cost that much, but it is very difficult politically and managerially. Many BRTs have failed because have not been done well. So it has to be very well done so that it really works efficient. Now, I think it should be the more private, the better. All the buses in Bogotá are privately owned. They are sort of contracted by the public company, government-owned company that contracts them and pays them a little bit by kilometer. It's a long story. I don't have time here to explain. But let's go quickly. Now, an efficient bus-based mass transit could link Spanish Town, Portmore, and downtown Kingston. I mean, I would believe this is. We also bought, we hire, me as mayor, it's not like I hate rail, I love it. I contracted the Bogotá subway under construction. But it's interesting, and we left both. See, here you see under the metro, we left the BRT, and so the BRT works a little bit as the local one and the metro as the express one. So and my last slide, you didn't have to cut me off. You know, it's very difficult for upper income people in developing country cities to use public transport, you know. Most of them think I can assure you that upper income people in Kingston, the same as in Bogotá or in any Latin American city, they have used much the subway in London, in New York, in Paris, next to homeless people who may not smell well, all of that, and that's fine. But they would never be caught dead in a public transport bus next to their own low-income fellow countrymen. This is something we need to change. So I would say that, and takes time. Now in Bogotá, we have a lot of car owners who use the BRT. Why do they use it? Again, it's not because they love it. No, it's because it's much faster than going by car. They go, it's 4 times longer to take the car, and they don't have to find parking places and all that. And again, we are all like you. There are also crime and thieves and all that, you know. And upper income people say, oh, it's so dangerous to go into the bus. And then when you listen to them, you'd imagine everybody carries the cell phone in their underwear or something. No, but when I use it frequently, and I would say at least 1/3 of the people are using their cell phone in the bus. And of course, there is some crime in the bus and outside of the bus too, in the street. I mean, but anyway, it's just, I think you have fantastic possibilities. Of course, every decision, everything that you will going to make is difficult. Any decision is difficult. I like to say that, for example, many of the informal operators that we had before became shareholders of the new operating companies. And many of them became very wealthy. And they even now operate systems in other countries, in other cities. So it's interesting. But so the important thing is that you have a fantastic city. And I think I envy you in many, many ways. And I wish you great success in all your projects. Thank you very much.
I think we can do a little better than that. Thank you so much, Enrique. So I'm going to give you time to take a sip of water while I introduce myself. Hi, everyone. My name is Doreen Duncan. I am the Executive Director of Island City Lab. We're an urban planning, urban design research think tank that is really focused on understanding Caribbean cities. And transportation has been one of the things that we've been studying for quite some time, for several years now. So super excited to be a part of this production and to have Enrique, who I studied in school several times, to come and talk about BRT, talk about pedestrian, info infrastructure and really building a city for people. So I want to encourage you all that we are using Slido for the Q&A segment. So if you have not already submitted your question, there's still time. Can we bring up, there's the instructions for using Slido. So you can just type it on your phone, and you can put in your question, and you can also upvote other questions that people have submitted. So I am going to take some liberties and start with my questions first while you guys are typing in things. But you mentioned something, Enrique. You said about when you did it in 1999, it was about 10% of the population of the city that owned cars. Right now in Kingston, it's about 25% based on our last census, right? And as you said, that 25%, which includes probably most of us in here, is very loud, very vocal, very powerful folks, right? So when you are saying, I'm taking away parking spaces, I'm reducing the sort of comfort that you experience being a car owner, how did you sell this type of infrastructure to the minority of folks who are very powerful, but who own cars and are invested in sort of car infrastructure?
We are still making BRT, and now we have nearly 30% of people, of households owning cars. 30%. But we have some interesting car use restrictions, by the way. By car tag numbers, people cannot take out the car one day, the other one they can. So they only can use it half the time. But we instituted a sort of a tropical congestion charge because the upper income people would anyway find a way to have 2 cars or something. So we organized that they could pay a lot of money to use the car. So we are collecting now like $250 million a year because people are paying to use the car on the not allowed day. I mean, ideally it should not happen, but at least it's some money to improve the public transport. But I would say that in Bogotá now, the car owners don't dare to say, many of them oppose, especially on this street in main artery that goes through the highest income area in Bogotá and in Colombia. But they never dare to say that the buses are taking space away from them, because it's already politically accepted that this has to be used. So they invent some other things, that this it doesn't look good or is bad for the environment. But whatever. But it's really now, I would say that people in Bogotá, everybody accepts this, that as somebody, it's like now people, like when I was first mayor 25 years ago or something, there were no sidewalks. Now every single road that is made, not only in Bogotá, in Colombia, has sidewalks, has bikeways, protected bikeways, has trees. And again, this is something that people already got used to it. And this is, I don't think anybody would dare, even if they oppose the system, they would never dare say it's because it takes space away from their cars. They would not. By the way, let me tell you something. If you have a 3-lane for cars, a 3-lane road in which direction, or even a 2, if you put a BRT, you need buses anyway. It's not like you can have buses or not have any public transport at all. No? This is very important, even though people don't understand it very well. But actually, with BRT, you use up much less road space than with the traditional buses that are going in all lanes, stopping everywhere, and all this. So here you have only 1 lane for the bus, and then the other 2 are free for cars or other mixed traffic, So actually, the way to have the least amount of buses and to use up the least amount of space is to have BRT is nothing. It's just a way of organized buses, because you are going to have buses anyway. If you are going to tell me, look, we don't need public transport, then I say, okay, fine. But if you do need public transport, the question is, which is the best way to organize buses? Which is the best way? And BRT is just a name for the most efficient way to organize buses, even for the car owners, because it's the way that it takes up the least space from cars.
So the answer is that the mayor and the Minister of Transportation just need to do it, and then we'll all get used to it. Yeah?
Yes, of course it's difficult at first.
Okay.
I'm not going to say it's not difficult.
Okay. So we have another question. So several of the images that you showed of Bogota included roads that were already pretty wide. They looked like they had 5, 6 lanes on them. Lots of our main roads in Jamaica still have 2 lanes. Can a BRT work on a road that only has 2 lanes?
That's a good question. If you only have a 2-lane road, you could actually have 1 lane for bus only, and then in a parallel road somewhere near, you could have the bus going in the other direction or something like this. In some cities, they do things like this. Again, so it depends on each case. Each case has to be studied. But what we do need is, in some radical cases, where it's not a big, long artery, we actually can get out cars altogether to make it only a bus road and no cars, like I showed in Melbourne or but it has to be studied in each case but what we really need is a system. What is revolution? What is mass transit? What we really need is a system that is much faster than going by car. That's basically it. Whatever. So there are many things we can do to achieve that. But that's the objective. If we don't achieve that, we have not done anything.
Thank you. So there's a question in here about sidewalks. I think if anyone walks around anywhere in Kingston, you'll understand that sidewalk, it doesn't seem like that there's a standardized design, right? The widths of them change, the obstacles in them change, the material that is used to build them changes. So how did you sort of standardize dignified sidewalks in Bogota?
We did. We still need to improve it a lot, but I don't discuss so much. I don't want necessarily to have the same material and the same kind of sidewalk in all of the city. Welcome architects to design their own thing in each place. But what I think is we need a high curb so that it's completely inaccessible to somebody driving up, or the next time the road is paved, then the sidewalk ends up at the same level as the road. So I don't. Those are the things that I would care most about. Not so much about where the design is one way or another. I think even some neighborhoods can have one design, others another, is no problem.
Okay. So there's a question in here that's talking about the transportation system that is kind of proliferated by private operators. Can you talk about what that system looked like in Bogota and how you were able to bring those sort of mishmash of private operators into a very organized and efficient system?
Well, it was worse than here. I saw twice, I swear what I'm going to tell you is true. A bus overtook the other one. It closed, how do you say this? Cut in front, exactly. And blocked the bus that was coming behind. Then the driver proceeded to get off the bus with a steel bar, and then he went and broke each and every one of the windows of the other bus, which was full of passengers. And I saw this thing twice, this system was so crazy. I had a lady who worked for me at one point. She had only one daughter, and one of these crazy buses racing for passengers ran into the sidewalk and killed her daughter. And this is my person who worked with me. It's not somebody that I read in the paper or something, So it was a crazy system. People used to hang out of the doors. So of course it's difficult, but we have all the negotiation. There are some people who are experts in this, and so you have to have the good guy and the bad guy and this thing. But more or less, I said I was the bad one, of course, and I said, look, another one was, say, let's negotiate. Either you do this, I will get rid of you. You can be members, shareholders of the new system, or you will be out, period. And again, as I said, we had to show them that this could be a good business, and thank God it was a good business, and they made a lot of money. Of course, not everybody of the informal operators can become a shareholder. Not every, so some of the people you have to pay, and so we pay them twice as much or 3 times as much is what their vehicle is worth or whatever. I mean, it's, of course, this is something that has to be, and besides, the idea is that you are not going to do this thing in the whole city at once. Just one trunkway at first, maybe 2 at the most, or 1.5, something, and then slowly we still have several to go in Bogotá. It's not like we have everywhere.
So we have a really interesting question about kind of affordability of the city, right? So if pedestrian-focused development, so such like the BRT, the parks, the sidewalks, increase land value, how do you maintain affordability so the poor, the middle class who are already living in downtowns can remain there?
Well, this is actually this is one great advantage of BRT over trams or subways, because with the same money you can do 10 times more. So if you only do one short subway line, then the prices go very much and the people are priced out of the area. But if you have the system everywhere, the difference is not so huge, because in many areas you have the public transport. I think this is a long discussion, this gentrification issue, because I think areas of the city improve sometimes some areas become faddish. The fad is to go live in some area, even if there is no public works there, just for some reason. But I don't think that there has never been a complaint that sidewalks push people out of an area. But what is interesting that I loved, I wanted to go kiss these developers, is that many developers, when they began to make new buildings, they themselves began to make wonderful sidewalks after a while. Not because they had an obligation or because they loved me or not, just because they realized it was good business. They would sell their new buildings they were making, they would sell better if they had a nice sidewalk. So I don't think it was the impact was so huge. At least it has never been a discussion that because we make, I mean, in many areas, we have, for example, in some very low income areas, we just did, for example, a road, like a 20-kilometer road that we had to demolish a huge area to make the road, a 6-lane road with bikeways and big sidewalks and trees and all this. And of course, it must have increased the value of the people around a lot. But I have never heard a complaint, because actually it's just improving the whole low-income neighborhood. And it's not so much as it becomes unaffordable. I have never heard of this. Of course, there are many people very poor who cannot afford a home. But by the way, this is for another talk. But I made, as mayor in 2 occasions, I legalized, I lived a wonderful time. I have to write this story, and it's a little bit in the book. I recommend you my book, it's very important. But I legalized more than 500 informal neighborhoods. I legalized 5 times more than the next mayor did. And so we legalized them, we put schools, we put parks, amazing schools, beautiful schools, like the best private schools you can find anywhere. Beautiful luxury schools. And then nurseries, parks, amazing parks, much better parks in low-income neighborhoods than anywhere near where I live. And even, for equity, something that we did with the city budget, for example, this last time, we made a lot of, for example, these happiness centers with swimming pools and music centers and all this in low-income neighborhoods. And in the upper-income neighborhoods, we charge something that we call a valorización, which is a property tax surcharge, so as to make works and improve the upper-income neighborhoods and to make even one of these happiness centers in an upper-income neighborhood. But it was paid by themselves. We have, by the way, extremely high property taxes in Bogotá. We have a very efficient cadastral system, even too efficient, I think, because I think many times the price is registered is even higher than the commercial value. But we pay, for example, people in upper income, upper middle and upper income, they pay between 1 and 2.5 monthly rentals in property tax every year. And this is all invested in low-income areas because upper-income people don't go to public schools or to public hospitals or to public nurseries. So this is a very powerful redistribution. I think I went out of the question. But anyway.
You did. But you answered it. I have a question here from Ajala Kings, and I'm assuming this is a student at UTech. They said on their university study tour of Dominican Republic, they saw lots of open public parks that were really active. What determines the placement of a public park?
Okay. When cities are growing, this again, I got more public park land than and that all mayors in the history of the city put together, which was not difficult because none of them really wanted to do much about this, But a park is crucial when the city is growing because if you are able to save 10 hectares for a park or 1 hectare or whatever, this will make people happier for the next 1,000 years. And then if you build a city over it, it's very difficult to demolish 1 hectare or 2 or 10 hectares of city to make a park. So it's very crucial. Where do you put them? Where you can. I mean, we have some regulations in theory that urban developers, the private developers, but we have, in my 2 terms as mayor, I did housing projects for 500,000 people at the size of Kingston practically. 2 housing projects, amazing. And so in the first case, in 1998, 1999, we have a huge recession. So we bought the land, we bought land bordering the city, like an urban land reform, and we did housing development. We don't have time to explain it, but the builders were private people and they sold it, but under some regulations as to the price and all this. In the second case was more private. We got an area in the outskirts of the city, but where the city was growing. I mean, outskirts, but much closer to the center. I mean, there was no, because Bogotá is very dense, as close as you could. And we got more than 1,000 landowners, and we forced them to give the land to a fiduciary. And the city designed the urban plan, and they have to pay the whole infrastructure, roads, pipes, everything. And even though it was in one of the expensive areas, the city, the upper income people are to the north, more than 40% of homes there were social housing. In this housing for 400,000 people. But so these are 2 schemes in which you can organize housing, but then of course the parks in the new areas are fantastic. We left, I mean, this new area I'm telling you has, for example, one park like 130 hectares and many others and some greenways crisscrossing the area. But where should parks be? I mean, I believe everywhere you can put parks is a good thing for cities. I have never seen one where it's not a good thing to have a park there.
We have a comment in here about us having a golf course in the middle of the city. Any thoughts for making that actually more public?
Look, again, I love golf course, golf players, whatever, but I don't know. It depends on many things. For example, if you have some big land for public park nearby, no big deal, because maybe you don't need to turn the golf course into a park, But if there is not, I mean, of course, you have to make a lot of investments to improve the existing parks that you have today. But in the future, I do believe that there is a way that you should turn the golf course into a public park, and besides, it's free for the city, because all golf course members, all golf course members are very bright. They're very bright people. They're successful businessmen, So they have found a way not to pay property taxes on the golf course. Because they say this is an environmentally wonderful thing to do, and to save this green for the city and all that. For the city means themselves, So Actually, but I believe, so the fact is that since this is registered as such low value for property tax payment because it's just a park, so it's very cheap to buy, you know? It's very cheap, and you don't even have to buy it. You can do, for example, here, you can take the golf course. I mean, in a golf course, if you have extremely high occupation, the foursomes one after the other hitting with the ball to the one ahead of them, you can get about 250 people in a day or something like this. And you can have in the same space 100,000 people in a park. But then, so you could take give 20% of the area of the golf course to make high-rise buildings around the golf course for the golf club to do the business, and with the money they make, they can go buy another piece of land somewhat farther out of the city, and the rest, the other 80%, becomes a public park. Anyway, this is a long discussion, and I don't want to say I don't want to put it as a class issue or hate issue or anything, you know. I had a lot of fights with low-income people to, for example, to take over some informal vendors who were destroying the public space, you know, and we pay them and we recover some areas. So it's not, I mean, it's sometimes you have to fight with some powerful and some others with some middle class and some others even with low-income people. Always as respectful as possible, always helping as much everybody, but this clearly, I mean, is an issue. I mean, sooner or later, at least you should begin discussing the possibility of turning the golf course into a public park in the future and to save it. Because, you have many parks at this time that you could improve a lot before you do that one.
So we have another couple questions in here around financing. So we have a very different structure here in Jamaica. We know that the mayor doesn't necessarily have as many powers as mayors do in Colombia. But could you talk about financing for all of this infrastructure? Was it local, sort of city-related funding, or did you also include federal funding from the
That's a great question. Happily, in Bogotá, the mayor is extremely powerful. So it's like New York. You know, it has a lot of power, it has money. Even the money the national government gives to the city is automatic transfers according to the number of children in schools and all this. But for example, we pay about 50% of the health budget, and we pay like 45% of the education budget. In theory, national government should cover the whole thing, but we cover it, the Bogotá. Bogotá has a very efficient financial system, and even Bogotá gives a lot of subsidies to low-income people. But the national government gives us money for mass transit. Mass transit always is financed by national governments, even in Germany, even in the United States, everywhere, even in the federal systems, mass transit investments are largely financed by national government. So our BRT has been paid about 70% by national government. And something, again, very interesting is that much of the investment in BRT is not really on BRT, but on sidewalks and even in car lanes and things like this. So, but the city of Bogotá has a lot of money. We have some taxes that are property tax, some sort of crude sales tax, a tax on fuel. I mean, and as I told you, we charge for not complying to the tax use restriction. I mean, but we have a budget. It's a lot of money.
But not to let that discourage us in this context, right?
No. I mean, of course, if the people who have the money is national government, one thing that the national government has to realize is that the most crucial competitive edge for Jamaica in the future is cities. It's cities. I mean, of course, we need to help the farmers as much as possible and do rural roads and all this. But where the majority of Jamaicans live is cities, and that's also where the most productive people are. And all that, so we need to invest in rural areas and in education, rural areas, water in rural areas, all kinds, of course. But national government, so if national government is the one who have the money, we have to try to convince them. That's the way to pay at least part of it. I mean, the important thing I don't know about Kingston again is that we have, and this is very important, we have an extremely efficient cadastral system and a very heavy property tax, which is paid in much higher rates to upper income people and much lower, even for example, for the water service. We charge the water to the upper income people, they pay up to 9 times more per cubic meter than the low income people for the same cubic meter. It's like a cross subsidy done by the water company. So I think you need to get, I mean, if you want to do work, I think, I don't know, Mayor, with all due respect, but if Jamaica, if Kingston doesn't have it, it's necessary to work towards a system in which the city begins to have more independent financially and to have a more significant income from, especially from property tax.
Agreed. Love to give mayors a little bit more independence to make some of these decisions. And so there's another question in here.
Minister, thank you very much for coming.
Oh, okay.
Please,
We have a commitment. So the next question here is about JUTC, about our public bus. Thank you. So there's a question, kind of, there's a general critique for JUTC, but I think generally buses, public buses, that they are inefficient and they're never profitable, right? I guess one part of this question is, could you talk about that myth that public transportation is supposed to somehow be profitable? And two, as we move towards having a bus rapid transportation system in Kingston, what are some of the sort of policy changes that need to happen with JUTC for it to start to become more efficient?
Well, in general, I think that publicly owned buses are not efficient in general in the world. It normally has some very expensive, they have some unions that charge a lot of money and they have a lot of political appointees. Most publicly owned companies, for example, in Bogotá, our electricity company, the city owns the electricity company, is we own 51%, but it's managed by a private operator, by an Italian Enel, and the water company is fully owned by the city. And clearly the electricity company or even the gas company, which is also, we have shares, but is privately owned and privately managed, is 10 times more efficient than the publicly owned, because, you know, the councilmen everywhere, I would say maybe not here, but the pressure is to appoint more people than is necessary. You know, if they don't care if they have enough drivers, they would like to have twice as many drivers as needed. And even if they don't know how to drive, it doesn't matter because it's their friend or something. So, and then, so I think the more, I mean, today myself, even though our buses are privately operated and there is a city-owned company that subcontracts with them and it pays them per kilometer, basically. But I would make it even more private if I were to make a new system than we did. But these buses managed by these private operators are amazingly efficient. So I think I don't know again how JUTC works, but in general, everywhere in the world, it's very difficult to have an efficient, and in some cases it's really horrible. I mean, when I was in one time in my life vice president of the water company, and some people, would steal the fuel of the cars from the water company. And I mean, I would say a publicly owned bus leaves the north of the city and arrives in the south with another engine. No, it's just, I'm serious, but. Thank you, Minister.
So we're going to take one more question, Anna. So someone, Lydia Chang, a question from her. You mentioned BRT, which is bus rapid transportation, has failed when not implemented well. What are the factors that make a BRT successful?
Well, that's a very good question. Well, for example, it's much better if buses are privately owned. But the main error that generally is done is that buses are not put in the highest demand corridor. Because many times in the highest demand corridor, there are many cars. And so politically it's easier to move it a few blocks to one side or the other, so they say, but then it doesn't work. And then people say, oh, see, BRT doesn't work, So that's perhaps the most important thing, but there are other things that have, for example, I think you have to subcontract the whole operation, the ticketing. And we made many mistakes, so we can teach what the things we did wrong. For example, the ticketing should be a private operator that does the ticketing. Ideally, eventually becomes even, of course, very soon all the tickets will be paid like with a credit card, like in other places. You don't even need a ticket or anything. But I don't have I have my card there because I use the bus. But there's a few details that are important for this thing to work well. But anyway, but it's not rocket science either. Most of the difficulties stem from political difficulties. It's not that this is rocket science in terms of technical design.
So I know I said that was the last question, but this is the real last question. So there's several questions in here about taxis, as though Jamaican taximen are, unique and that they're not similar in Bogota. But how do you enforce that the bus rapid transit lane remains only for buses?
Remains what?
Only for buses, so that we don't have taxis.
Oh, the cars. Oh, no. This is something, in our system is so massive that it would be impossible. It would be suicidal to get into the bus lane because it's one after the other. And these giant buses, most of our buses are three-bodied buses. They go very fast. And if somebody gets in there, first of all, it's social condemnation because it's too flagrant. It's like, so it never happens. The only fight that I have, I will tell you, I confess here, is that ambulance drivers, they put the siren and they get into this thing, and if they are not going to pick up any ill person, and they don't have any ill person either, So when I was mayor, I used to stop them all the time and find them and blah, 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 and find the company. But normally nobody does this. Nobody ever goes. And even sometimes the president or something goes into the bus thing with his caravan, and there is huge popular condemnation that the president uses this bus lane. Everybody begins in Twitter, in all the social networks, they take pictures, video, blah, blah, blah. So it cost him blood to go in there. Even no minister or something that could ever dare go into this thing. So of course, because we have an extremely high frequency system, maybe this is a different issue here. Here you can find that if you have very low demand, you could find a way to allow perhaps some other vehicles in the trunk, but because once you get them in, you cannot get them out.
Thank you so much. So I think our Q&A time is up. I want to thank Enrique so much for sharing all of this experience and knowledge with us.
Thank you very much. You are very generous. Thank you very much. It was wonderful to be here with you.
Yeah, and I'd like to welcome to the podium Pan Jamaica's Group CEO, Mr. Jeffrey Hall.
Thank you. Minister of Transport, Darrell Vaz. Our Leader of the Opposition and my friend, Mark Golding. Mayor of Kingston, Andrew Swaby, and Senator Shireen Golding, who's here as well. Chairman of the Pan Jamaica Group and our host, chairman also of the C.B. Facey Foundation, Stephen Facey. I think that the inspiration the ideas, the pragmatism, the candidness that the Honorable Maurice Facey Lecture Series brings to us is just a beautiful gift to the city of Kingston, to my city and my home. And my job today is very simple. It's just to say thank you. But even that I'm not going to do by myself. I'm going to invite Anna Ward to show her face since she does the work. So we're going to be quick about this. Anna is the boss lady of the CB Facey Foundation. She has a team, including Gayon Douglas, who's here. I'm going to be very quick, Anna, for two reasons. One is that we have a lot of work to do. We've got to pedestrianize this city. We've got to build sidewalks. We've got to get our BRT going. We've got parks to build. So we've got to get going. But the second reason we're going to be quick about this is I want everybody to go into rush hour traffic today and think about where we're going to put that BRT. Okay, so my people to thank are Enrique Peñalosa, and we're going to buy the book, right? Thank you for coming. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for inspiring us. Anna and Gayon of the CB Facey Foundation, you did the work. We appreciate it. We had volunteers. They were wearing black t-shirts. They're scholarship students, some from the Edna Manley College and from UTEC, from the Caribbean School of Architecture. The S Hotel, our hosts, the Kingston Restoration Company, who aligns with us in our mission. The Rock Hotel, that's a great hotel, and by the waterfront that we're supposed to be emphasizing. The Jamaica Chamber of Commerce, who's going to pay for all this stuff. The Urban Development Corporation are here. We appreciate you. Planned this together. The ideas and insights of the University of Technology, Caribbean School of Architecture. The Jamaica Institute of Architects were on board and participated. And a special big up to Doreen Duncan from the Island Labs. I thought that moderation was excellent. And before you get going to the traffic, and by the way, there are some cocktails so we can keep the conversation going for those of you who want to think about rapid transport rather than to actually experience it at this moment. So the final person that I want to thank for this inspiring lecture, the Maurice Facey, Honorable Maurice Facey Lecture Series, is you for attending, for receiving these ideas, and for taking responsibility for proliferating them across our city. Thank you.